Hello, Virgo, and welcome to your 2017 spring and summer reading. My name is Eric Francis Coppolino, your astrologer for the next half hour or so, here to tell you a bit about what is going on in the planets and how, in particular, that influences Virgo rising, and if you're one of those super lunar sensitive people, Virgo moon. As you know, there is an eclipse of the sun coming. It's an unusual eclipse in part because it streaks across the entire United States in a way that no eclipse has done in the last 250 years, meaning in the entire history of the United States of America. So this is being called, I'm not sure if I thought of it or someone else thought of it, the Great American Eclipse, because it, excuse me, I'm hiccuping, is the first eclipse in our lifetimes to where the path of totality goes from the west coast straight across to the east coast in approximately southeasterly direction, coming in Oregon and leaving in South Carolina. And the peak intensity of the eclipse happens over the city of Memphis, Tennessee, about as much of the heartland of the United States as you could possibly want to have. And this eclipse influences everyone differently. It is a different story in every single person's natal chart, and in the chart reading system that we're using here, the solar chart system, it affects the 12 solar charts, meaning the charts for the 12 signs and rising signs differently for everyone. And though this eclipse happens in Leo, it is arguably closer to being a Virgo event because in the solar house system, the beginning of the sign, the beginning of the whole sign house in that case, or the beginning of the sign, which is the house, is the most sensitive part of the sign. And so what I've noticed in 22 years of writing horoscopes and using the solar house system is that a planetary ingress is a big deal, and it affects everything about the archetype of that particular sign. And what is so interesting about this eclipse is that it is happening in late Leo, right here, but it's very close, a degree and a half away from the beginning of the sign Virgo. And so it is it's in this extraordinarily sensitive part of your chart, and it is about bringing out something from deep inside of you that you would not normally express. So remember that as the summer progresses, and as we move toward midsummer holiday Lammas on around the 1st to 5th of August, that's kind of your bell that's going to ring. That the pressure is going to increase on everyone, but there's a special pressure on you because of the zone in your chart where this happens, which is a kind of a contained area. The 12th house is like a I've described it a lot of different ways, but it's kind of like I'm on the second floor of my building, and my yoga teacher is her apartment is on the exact opposite side of the wall right there. I can't point the camera around, but it looks like an ordinary living room wall with kind of a black faux leather couch and a big aloe plant and all that. And on the other side of that wall is her life. And I never really think about it that way. It doesn't. Every now and then it'll occur to me, oh wow, Cassandra lives across on the other side of that wall. When I'm there, I'm noticing that my space is on the other side of the wall much more frequently than when I'm sitting here, and that's the effect of the 12th house. It's another location, another dimension. However, it's out of sight and can be out of mind. And so when the pressure is on, when the pressure is building as a result of this eclipse, it's going to be building in a place that is typically both out of sight and that is out of mind. Speaking of pressure, let's take one more. I'm using this somewhat simplified chart that I drew up for Gemini, and I've turned it sideways for Virgo to put Virgo on the ascendant. We were about to have an extraordinary week of astrology, mainly owing to the fact that Mars is moving along at nice and slowly, about 1/2 degree a day, moving through Gemini. Gemini is a sign on the mutable cross, and what happens to one sign on the mutable cross in some way happens to all the signs on the mutable cross. And by the way, I've done these readings by cross, starting with cardinal, then fixed, and then today beginning the mutable cross. And Mars has been crossing over your 10th house for a while, for about 6 weeks now. And that can be ambitious, and it can be, the favorite word is aspirational, meaning it wants to be something. Mars wants to be something, more, especially in the 10th house. It's about building reputation. It may have come with some conflicts with people in positions of authority, depending on your personality makeup, and depending on how willing you've been to assert yourself against the prevailing order of reality and make your way in the world, which I hope you have been doing. But the thing about Mars is that it is about to make an exact opposition to Saturn, and then it's going to make an exact square to Chiron. We can turn this upright so that you can just see the glyphs a little bit better. So Mars, which is really your 10th house, not your first, is going to oppose Saturn, and then it's going to square Chiron and oppose Pholus simultaneously. This is about working your way out of a hang-up of some kind. This is about needing to do something voluntarily that you want to do or that you need to do that you might ordinarily have someone push you into doing. You might set it up so that, like, well, you're not really sure you want to commit to a scuba diving vacation, but if your boyfriend really, really, really wants to go scuba diving, okay, you'll give in, and you'll quote unquote give in and go down to Honduras, wherever, and visit the fish below the ocean. But you want to do it, but you have to be pushed. Now, this is a particular character trait of Mars and Chiron in a square. It's a particular character trait of Mars-Chiron effects generally, but I think that the square is particularly sensitive to this. And because Virgo is so closely associated with Chiron, it doesn't rule Virgo, but it's close to ruling it. Chiron, like a lot of well-developed planets, has 2 primary signs it's affiliated with and a few secondary signs. The 2 primary signs are Sagittarius and Virgo. And I think this describes something and about you. And so the thing is, go willingly to what you want. Embrace willingly who you love and who you want. And if one of the things that you want is to more boldly express yourself, particularly in your professional life, if you want to establish your reputation, consider doing that, and consider doing that even if you perceive that it's offensive to people that you care about. It may violate some rule of relationship. It may be a challenge because you're insecure about something or about someone, or it may just be that you consider yourself too retreating to try too hard for something, but I really don't think you are. I think Virgo is one of the most intense signs, but that it tends to conceal that intensity, and then it comes out in unusual and odd ways. And Virgo, in my experience, can really get in trouble from too much holding down of what you want, because then, or even asserting yourself about what you don't like, because then once you've held it down for so long, the energy's got to come out in some way. This is, I don't know if it's the third law or first law of thermodynamics. You can't create or destroy energy. You can only change its form. And when you suppress energy, you're not making it go away. The question then becomes, what is the form that it comes out in? So being mindful of that. There is tension. There is pressure. And this last week of May, I will hopefully have this thing in your hands well before then. This last week of May is a kind of a crucible, and it is a a bit of an integrity check in terms of what you're willing to let yourself express. And here's where this shows up even more significantly. And here's your proper solar chart with many more points included. And this, by the way, if you're going to do astrology without the official certified birth date, place, and time, you work with a solar chart, and the solar chart really works quite well. As you can see, this is actually a complete chart with an ascendant and with houses and with planets in houses and signs on the cusp. This is the chart for Virgo. So we're back now. We're going to work a little closer to the screen. We're back now, and here's the total solar eclipse right in that hidden room, right in that room next to your room that you never remember is there, or you only remember like when you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and think about it for a second and fall back asleep. And here is a point that is just not used by many astrologers anymore. I don't know anyone who uses it, but it's called trans-Pluto. It's a very slow-moving point. It takes 75 years to go through a sign. It's a hypothetical point, and what it represents is the constriction or narrowing of consciousness. On the useful side, it can represent the sharpening of something. It can represent the focusing of something in a way to, put a point on it, and you have to make that specific point. But mostly it represents a kind of a blind spot, or it represents, like, for example, looking the wrong way through binoculars and seeing whatever you're looking at both being very small and very far away, and also you see how narrow the view is, right? So the problem with having trans-Pluto in your sign, it's pretty new. It's only been there for about 3 years. It's going to be there for like forever. Is that it can represent a blind spot, and it can represent if not a blind spot, a kind of tunnel vision, and the thing that your chart is howling for is a wider view of life, a wider view of yourself, a wider, more embracing concept of your potential. So you might want to try that. Now, for as focused as this can be, there is a lot in your relationship house that is trying to get you to be more open, to take a much wider view, and to you that might seem like it's lacking all boundaries, right? If you're all about the certainty of who you are, and the how do we say this, your perspective, your point of view, something that has diversity, that comes with uncertainty, that comes with difficulty explaining what it is, that can seem disturbing. It can seem like just too much, and it's like, well, life is so crazy right now, I've really got to narrow down and focus and specialize. But we are past an age where that is safe, and we're past an age where it is even possible. We need to be able to take up anything that enters our sphere of consciousness and approach it with a humane, friendly, open-minded perspective on life, rather than kind of tamping down that aperture. So Mars is wanting you to, all this Pisces activity is wanting you to open up. Mars, for its part, which is currently, let me just draw it in here. I'm going to put 0517 so we can see that. And I'm going to use a little ruler here so that I'm not. All right, just added this bit. Mars, opposite Saturn, is also pushing you into a wider viewpoint. Now, here's how this is showing up over and over again in the charts. The one of the main characteristics of Virgo is that it has Capricorn on the fifth house, and the fifth house is about play and experimentation and hanging loose, and Capricorn is about structure, limitations, tradition, and it's not easy to have Capricorn on the fifth house because it can make you feel like that child part of you never existed or never had the chance to actually play and like make a mess and the adults just help you clean up, and it's not that big of a deal. Pluto has been moving through your fifth house, however. See that there? Pluto in the fifth. And Pluto, for 10 years, has been working its way through your fifth house. And that has been all about chaos in the playroom. Kind of a great name for a mid-20th century play that's really ominous with little marionettes hanging or thrown around. And this has come with a genuine attempt to liberate yourself from this scourge of obsession with maturity and being proper. Now, it is 10-year-old news that Pluto is in Capricorn. It is approximately 5-year-old news that Pluto made a series of squares to Uranus in Aries, or Eris made the squares to Pluto in Capricorn. That was the Uranus-Pluto square that went on between 2011 and about 2015. In some ways, we're still living with the aftermath of that, but there's many other things going on. And this pushed you, and it pushed you to be more free and to experiment in ways that, let's say, you may or may not have appreciated the experiment because it may or may not have gone well, and you may have just decided that it was all too much. But I would encourage you to stick with your experiments in freedom, in particular your experiments in freedom in your relationships, and that may or may not mean you come out as anything in particular, whether it's polyamorous or as a swinger or bisexual or whatever. But the structure of your concept of yourself as a sexual being is kind of in a postmodern phase where you may decide that the definitions don't work, that none of them really apply to you. The very famous pioneering Virgo who you should know something about is Dr. Betty Dodson, and her first book and her early videos are well worth experiencing. And she was a person and remains a person who does her best to defy labels and to defy categories and structures and therefore to defy expectations. And with Pluto running through Capricorn, you kind of want to blow up the expectations that have been placed on you, especially around relationships, but more significantly around sex itself and around the creative process itself, right? There's something about having Capricorn on the fifth that says, well, the creative process, must be very organized, and there's a right way and a wrong way to do this, and the right way to do this is some version of the way that it was done in the past, but you need some new mojo in there. And one reason why you have a direct tap into that mojo is because you have Aries on the 8th house of your solar chart. A very interesting place to have Aries in your solar chart. Maybe the second most interesting. I think Taurus has the most interesting placement of Aries in the 12th. Having Aries in the 8th is similar. And what this suggests is that one of the ways that you define your quest for self is a quest for self in relationships. Now, There's a strong case to be made that the only way that we find out who we are is through relating to other people and essentially entering into some form of tension, competition, or conflict with them. And to have Aries on the 8th implies just that. It implies that at the very minimum, you will tend to seek yourself. Say its identity is even too vague. You'll tend to seek yourself in relationship to other people. And this worked for a while. It probably worked till like around 2003, I would say. I don't know how old you are, but go back to around 2003 when Uranus entered your relationship angle Pisces and basically began a 14-year journey, 7 years across Pisces, 7 years across Aries. That pretty much covers your relationship angle. Now Uranus is at the end of that journey, and what a journey it has been. And the thing with Uranus active in your relationship angle is that there's no predictability. There is no kind of reasonable expectation you can have of that, except to say, well, a lot's in motion. There's a lot of moving parts here, and who are all these weirdos, and why are people acting this way, and how exactly do I form an agreement with people? And this is, finally, this story is going to start to change in a big way in 2018 when Uranus moves on to your ninth house, but there will still be important elements making this bridge. Have I drawn this bridge in? I have. Between your fifth house, this sort of careful and conservative approach to play, experimentation, sex, and creativity, and your eighth house where you seek yourself in relationships. Pluto is going to keep working its way through late Capricorn, moves much more slowly than Uranus, and it's going to make a series of squares to Eris, which moves even more slowly than Pluto. This connection between the fifth house of your like sexual experiments and creative experiments and romantic experiments and the willingness to take risks that's been pumped by Pluto the last 10 years. And Uranus Eris, it's going to be Eris pretty soon, only in your eighth house, driving a kind of a self identity and self seeking in relationships is only going to burst on and on and on and on. So the thing that it's essential to do is, first of all, pause having expectations as much as you can. Second, remember there are many ways to relate, and that ultimately everyone relates to people differently, and every pair of people relates to itself differently than every other pair of people in the world. And so the truth is there's a different sexual orientation, an emotional and relational orientation for everyone on the planet. This whole LGBTQIA thing is, it seems like a long acronym or abbreviation, but actually it should be about 8 billion letters long, because every person relates to their creative process, to their sexuality, and to their relationships differently. And the difference is what is currently being emphasized in your chart. And it would seem like there is something in you that really needs to be born, that needs to come out of the cosmic birth canal and manifest, and that it is you becoming the person you are. And you simply can no longer allow yourself to be hamstrung by concepts of relationship that might prevent you from getting the relationships that you need that would help you grow in the ways you want to grow, and secondarily, a too narrow self-concept indicated by trans Pluto in the first house. So open up your aperture. Let things be a little more fuzzy. try walking around without your contact lenses in for an afternoon. Let things blur a little bit. Let the lines let the lines mix a little bit. Let the colors blend. Everything doesn't have to be so. That like every element of the picture is in focus at the same time. There are lots of beautiful photos which are taken with a very wide aperture, where a part of the field is in focus, and that creates context. One of the things that happens when you want everything to be in focus all the time is that you lose depth perspective, you lose a sense of context, and it's basically boring, because it is interesting for me to see this microphone out of the corner of my eye, and then to have a visual field that extends forward. This is more the way you need to look at the world, with depth and with this broad aperture. A couple of other points. Let's see. Let's preview. We've previewed the eclipse, right? The eclipse is like jamming on "Let's Grow and Change," right? From this hidden dimension, which will readily manifest in your life. It will help if you pay attention during this August, new moon to new moon, around July 23rd to August 21st. It's going to be very interesting time in your life for understanding the hidden dimension of who you are and the astonishing vitality that you contain. One more layer to add to the Capricorn Aries connection. Remembering Capricorn Aries is, by the way, easy to look this up. Just look up Uranus-Pluto square and my name. You'll come up with 20 articles describing the Uranus-Pluto square. But for you, the Uranus-Pluto square is remembering Pluto in the house of Capricorn-style childhood, and never was allowed to leave your toys out, and then the ensuing kind of anarchy of Pluto just kind of coming through and saying, all right, bigger ideas, bigger concepts. Let's get all these classical Corinthian columns and blocks of old marble out of the way and put them somewhere and live a little more modern. And then your, speaking of modern, self-concept being driven by a combination of needing to find yourself in relationship, but at the same time it's friggin' Uranus and Eris, which arguably makes absolutely no sense at all. And you may think, my whole search for self is completely fucked. I don't know who I am. I've been at this forever. I don't know who I am. I'll just latch on to something. Trans-Pluto in my sign. I'll just pick the one thing that I am. I'm a paperclip folder, whatever that might be. No, you want to take the opposite response and be wider and bigger. All right. There's going to be a shift of the energy with this, because next year 3 planets change signs. Uranus goes into Taurus. That's interesting. That ought to, get your pilot's license for that one. You're going to want to fly around a lot, and you might need your own airplane. Next is that Chiron is going into Aries, and this will help you focus your quest for identity through relationship. Chiron will provide relief to all things influenced by the sign Aries, because Chiron is not an anarchist influence. Chiron is like you, wants a combination of order and experimentation. It wants a combination of stability and change. And one thing we can say for sure is we live in a time of too damned much change. We're not meant to endure this much change this fast. Chiron entering Aries will stabilize that process for you, in my take as an astrologer, and poignantly focus your quest for yourself through relationship. We don't quite know what that means, but there's a redefinition of your concept of relationship. Finally, Saturn enters Capricorn. It's going to clear the conjunction with the galactic core in December and then enter Capricorn, where it will stay for 2.5 years. And this is another kind of harbinger of increased productivity after a period of impressive chaos. My sense is that first of all, you will appreciate these transits as they happen. That includes the eclipse, because you're going to get a tap into a little bit of extra mojo with your 12th house being called attention to, and kind of opening up a vent, like how you might feel if you hadn't had an orgasm in 10 years, and then suddenly you really have the big one. That's this eclipse, which will equalize the pressure between the interior of your psyche and the exterior environment around your psyche. And then other factors that are in my reading likely to stabilize these very erratic processes that have gone on. And what I'm suggesting is you do not have to wait for any next years. You can set your mind on this process. You can determine that you're going to focus these questions, this material, and you have the planetary placements to at least have awareness that these regions of yourself exist, because you've got descriptions and you understand something about the process that's going on, and you can get ahead of your transits and begin a process of refocusing and of stabilizing, remembering, of course, that there is some revelation at hand associated with this big eclipse that's coming just millimeters away from your door, from the entry into the sign Virgo, and you might want to work with that first. Pull your mindfulness within you. Get in the habit of revealing the things to yourself that you typically conceal from yourself, and revealing the things to partners that you typically conceal from partners, and gaining the confidence that can only come with being boldly, actually truthful with yourself and with others about who you are. All right. With these, revolution is within. That's all about Virgo. Please check your rising sign. Easy to find out. You need your more or less approximate time. The closer, the better. Rising sign changes every 2 hours. Try to get your birth time as close as you can, and check out your rising sign, because between that reading, this reading, and your perception, you get a triangulated thing that I think is ideal for making the most out of this type of astrology. All right. A pleasure working with you. I am going to call it a day here at Planet Waves. Two more signs to go. Where I'm hanging up the charts peeled off the gesso board as little trophies, and giving me a sense of accomplishment. Two more to go. They will be done, good Lord willing, pretty early tomorrow. We'll have this in your hands ASAP. Thank you. Thanks for being a patron of, friend of, someone who takes advantage of Planet Waves. Thanks for trusting me as your astrologer. Bye for now.